Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 29. Casting is 65% of directing. John Frankenheimer.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari, and I am super hyped about today's episode. Don't forget to head over to freefilmbook.com. That's freefilmbook.com to get your free audiobook download. And our show is sponsored by USC Film School's only online course, Directing the Actor. You can head over to indiefilmhustle.com/USC to download that. So, guys, today we have a episode that is just so chock full of nuts. I mean nuts by myself. It's so chock full of information that and such good golden nuggets that I had to call it the blueprint on how to make it in the film business, because Richard Botto from Stage 32 and I sat down and had this insane conversation about the film industry, about what he's doing and his journeys and my journeys, and we all kind of just got together, and you're literally a fly on the wall in the conversation. At the end of it, we even say, like, are you guys still here? We're just talking. So it is an awesome interview. So sit back and just get ready to take some notes, because there's a ton of stuff in this one. Enjoy. RB, thank you so much for being on the show, man. I really appreciate you guys taking out the time.
I appreciate you having me here, Alex.
Thanks, man. So when I've been online a long time looking through our niche as far as independent film is concerned, and when I came across Stage 32, I was blown away about what you were able to do with it. So please, by all means, tell people what this amazing platform is.
Yeah, I mean, it's an online platform that connects and educates film, television, and theater creatives worldwide. We've been called by Forbes LinkedIn meets Linda, and Linda is the most popular the biggest educational site on the web. So we're happy with that comparison. I think as far as LinkedIn is concerned, I do think there's a little bit more of a social element to what we do as far as that comparison is concerned, but it is all about connecting and educating film creatives online.
So then it's basically kind of like a LinkedIn, but then you also have courses and things like that you sell and give access to?
That's correct. Yeah, we have what we call Stage 32 Next Level Education, which consists of webinars, classes, and labs. And a couple of years ago, we also have an element for screenwriters that's dedicated strictly to screenwriters called the Stage 32 Happy Writers, which we acquired back in 2013. It was originally called the Happy Writers, now called the Stage 32 Happy Writers, which provides screenwriters the opportunity to be able to pitch their scripts directly to over 400 industry executives that we work with worldwide. And we also offer studio notes directly from executives where the screenwriter picks the executive. So those are some of the educational components of what we have on the site. And then, of course, there's the whole social element as well.
And the one thing I noticed about your courses is that they're very, very niche. Like, how to be a really good first AD, things like that, which you don't find anywhere else, which was really impressive to me. It's like, okay, they're not trying to here's 3-point lighting. Here's a camera. No, this is very specific and also very powerful educational tool.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's something that we pride ourselves in tremendously at Stage 32. One of the elements that I wanted to bring into the site from the very beginning was education. It took us a couple of years to build up the network to over a couple of 100,000 people before I introduced it. But during that time, what I was doing, and I should mention that I'm not just the CEO and the founder and CEO of this company, but I am, and I started as an actor. I'm a rep screenwriter. I'm a producer, so I'm just like everybody else that's on this site. And just like everybody else, I'm always looking to hone my craft. And when I was trying to do that in the screenwriting realm back in 2009, I found some really shady characters online and some snake oil salesmen when I was looking for classes. So
right.
It really kind of ticked me off, and I made the sort of pledge to myself that if this network connected with people, that the second phase of it would be to bring in education. So, today we work with over 400 educators worldwide. They're all people who worked in the industry or do work in the industry, people who have climbed the mountain. A lot of them just love to give back. So we try to cover all disciplines. Again, we don't want to just cater to the actors and the screenwriters, but we want to cater to the crew people, and we want to cater to, the craft services people and the people working in the back office and things of that nature. So we have classes for just about everyone. And again, we're very prideful about that.
Now, do you have any success stories about anybody in the community?
Yeah, plenty. I mean, in fact, I was literally 5 seconds before I got on this call, or on the podcast, I was going back and forth with a filmmaker. His name is David Roundtree. Mm-hmm. He just won 5 awards down at a horror fest down in San Diego for his film Cut. And David used over 30 Stage 32 members on that film. And it was a theatrical release, played in theaters for a little bit. And the film he made before that was 108 Stitches. And that one had I believe it was 23 or 24 Stage 32 members that he used on that one. And we're seeing more and more of that where filmmakers are coming to the site to use our job section to cast and crew up their films.
Interesting.
No, it's great.
That's awesome.
Also, and I mean, I can go on and on. I could talk about this for the next 3 hours. We have success stories. We've had so many. I mean, I could talk on the bigger level where, the Stage 32 Happy Writers, for example, has had over 200 success stories of people who have either been signed, optioned, or staffed. And then I could talk about it on a more micro level where, we just had a composer in Denmark score a film for a filmmaker in where the heck was he from? From in North Carolina, of all places. Where
Jesus, the internet.
Yeah, they put out. Well, that's the beauty of this, and this is the reason you say, it's the internet, and it's funny because you say, social media, and you put those two things together. I was not a social media guy when I started this site. In fact, I reluctantly kind of went on to LinkedIn as an actor, a screenwriter, and a producer, and a voice actor, trying to see if I could, drum up some work and drum up some connections, and nothing was happening. And I started talking to my friends in the business. Said, "What are you using?" And they're, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Google Plus. I'm like, "Are you getting anything out of it?" And the answer was almost always no. I'm dealing with people who aren't in the industry, and that's what when the light bulb kind of went off, and I said, "There's a need here for concentrated networking." For people who are in the business to, listen, I'm sure I know how busy you are. I know how hard you work. We don't have a lot of free time. I don't have a lot of free time. I certainly don't want to waste time on a broad-based social media site, and try to maybe drum up a conversation with somebody to talk about my third act problems and have my aunt come back to me and tell me to get a life. You know what I mean?
Right. So, or mom going in, they're like, "You're doing fine, Richard.
Doing fine. It'll all be okay by the 4th or 5th act here." Yeah, that's exactly what you get. So it's like, I want to be on a network with people who understand me. I think that you would agree, Alex. Every creative I ever talk to, the most important thing, the most important aspect that keeps them going is support. And if you don't have support, a lot of people leave the game. This is, we do a lot of things in isolation in this business. We write in isolation. We learn our lines in isolation sometimes. It's a lonely pursuit in a lot of ways, and it's not one that's really understood by people who don't pursue any sort of creative endeavor. So to have that kind of support and that kind of collaboration is so important. And I just didn't feel like that was available on broad-based networks, social networks.
Yeah, we're basically all carnies in many ways. We put on a show, and it's nice that it's a very niche group of people who do it, and only we understand what each other is going through, as opposed to people on the outside going, "What?"
Yep.
Like when I told my parents for the first time, "I'm going to be a director," and they're like, "What?"
Yeah.
I'm sure you got the same reaction.
Oh, hell, man. I had to go to pharmacy school for a year and have a really cool thing happen in an English composition class to finally convince my dad that, shit, he can write. So, maybe you shouldn't be putting pills from one big bottle into a smaller bottle. Maybe you should, go do something, go write something. So, I understand that. Absolutely.
So, let me ask you, why do you think people in general fail in Hollywood? Like when, everybody, I mean, literally the Boulevard of Broken Dreams is real. I mean, you could just go down any street in LA and you could just see people's dreams have been destroyed by this town because it's a rough town. It's not an easy town to make it in. But what is some of the reasons why you think people fail here?
I don't think it's just necessarily Hollywood.
Or the business in general.
Yeah, the business in general, and I think it's the same no matter where you are. And I think one is something I already touched on was a lack of support. I think the second thing is that people set unrealistic expectations, and
Mm-hmm.
don't really learn how the business works, and don't realize that it's a marathon and not a sprint. And
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
that, the biggest stars in Hollywood didn't just hop off the bus and have somebody run up to them and go, we're casting you in a $50 million, $100 million feature. I think that people, again, I think creatives, the idea of having support and having realistic expectations and being able to have a community around you that tempers those expectations and it allows you to be connected to people who have achieved enough that they're able to help you temper those expectations and at the same time give you sort of the roadmap as to what you can do, what's in your control to, maybe shorten that path. I think those are the things that, beat people down when they don't have those things. And, I think one of the things that we see on Stage 32 all the time is there are certain creatives, like let's say on the acting side, I'll use more specific examples. I just came from an audition I had an audition a few days ago. I thought I killed it and I just didn't get it and just all this other stuff. And they beat themselves down. And you'll get people that'll line up behind that post and say, what'd you learn from it? What's in your control? Because sometimes sometimes it's just out of your control. Sometimes you're not the fit and sometimes you're not the right person. But did you take anything away from the experience? Did you have a good experience with the casting director and maybe, so that they might remember you for the next thing? Did you leave a good impression? Did you control the things that are in your control? And I think a lot of times we as creatives, and believe me, I've been around this for a long time and I still get this way. It's not easy. It's easier said than done. We allow that piece of bad news or the no news, which is even worse when you don't hear anything, to right. to debilitate us, and to prevent us from going forward. And I think that the creatives that have endured the test of time, even when you talk to character actors in this business or any actor for that matter, they'll tell you that, hey, I had 1 year I had 7 roles and the next year I had none. But you know what? I knew that if I kept plugging and if I kept learning from every experience, that the following year I might have the opportunity to have 7 again. And it's that perseverance and that mindset, I think, that makes the difference 99% of the time.
Yeah, I was interviewing Robert Forster, who's amazing. He's amazing. I worked with him on a project, and I sat down and interviewed him. And he's just this wealth of information about actors, and just gotta keep plugging along. Just be grateful that you're a working actor. And the best advice I heard in that was, he said, no matter how small the part, no matter what you're doing, just bring the best you've got to it that day. That's all you can control. And that goes for every discipline, whether it be writing, directing, anything. But he said, just bring the best you could do, because if you do your best, you don't know what can open up other doors. But if you just phone it in, that opportunity just might fade away, and it might not lead to other opportunities.
Such great advice, because, and look, it applies to his career, right? He had that down, he had that downturn, and he was doing, a lot of B and I guess C, if you want to call it.
Sure. Yeah.
And then, Tarantino comes calling, and it changes the whole game for him again. But Bryan Cranston, I was reading an article recently with him, or an interview with him, or watching an interview with him. And he said almost the same exact thing. He said, my career changed. He goes, when I realized that things weren't in my control. And if I just brought everything I had every time that something was in my control, that things would work out. And he said, and that's when things started turning for me. And I think that's true for anybody who's a creative. I think that you have to bring the best that you have. You have to always be willing to learn. You have to always be taking it upon yourself to learn, because that's, I think, another mistake that people make, is that they don't consistently hone their craft. They think there's a ceiling. There's never a ceiling.
Oh, no, never.
Never, and, what might not have worked today might work tomorrow. So you just have to persevere and do the best you can.
Now, on a business standpoint, on a business note, you used to run a magazine called Razor, correct?
Yep, I did.
So what did you learn about publishing that magazine? What lessons did you learn by doing that experience to bring it to Stage 30? What did you bring to Stage 32?
Well, the first thing I learned is never to do a freaking magazine again.
I was going to say I was going to start Indie Film Hustle magazine next week, but thank you.
No. Well, at least not on a national scale when you're a single title publisher. But I'll reserve that for another. We actually did very well. We used to outsell GQ and Esquire. We did very, very well in the space, but as a single title publisher, it was tough. But what I learned that I brought over to Stage 32 is we had a very, very fervent following with Razor. People understood what we were doing and what the Razor guy, or the Razor man, as we used to call him, what that embodied. And people loved that sense of community, and that's the positive nature that we brought to the magazine every month, and that idea that, gentlemen still exist, there are real men still out there, and we're not all laddie boys that the Maxim mentality was promoting. Right. And even though it might have been like a certain segment, it was a very, very
loyal.
Loyal and fervent, like I said earlier. So one of the things that I carried over to Stage 32 is that I wanted to have this sense of positive community. And, online, there's a ton of trolls. You go onto YouTube, make a post, within 5 seconds, you got 5 people tearing you apart, hiding behind an alias of a name and everything that. Sure. So what I wanted from the beginning was I wanted to diffuse the cynicism. And that was something I wanted to do at Razor as well, because there is this sort of cynicism, or there was even back then, that people didn't want anything besides, like, let's say, Maxim, and there wasn't any place new in the marketplace for what we were trying to do. But we found that there was, and people bought into it. Same thing with Stage 32. I wanted people, when they signed up, 2 things that I wanted people to understand. First question, of course, is why should I be on this site and not on Facebook or LinkedIn or one of the broader base networks? Mm. And so I had a welcome letter that kind of explained why, about the concentrated networking on the site. The second thing I wanted people to understand was that it was the first thing. I should reverse these, but the first thing was I wanted people to understand that I was just like them. And that was the same thing I did with Razor. My editorial at the beginning, the editor's letter, was always about, the mission and what we were doing and what we, the community aspect, and being very positive minded and everything along those lines. So I wanted the community to know I was just like them. I wasn't just some CEO in an ivory tower. Mm-hmm. I was, I'm scratching and clawing just like you are. So there was that. Then there was this idea of community. The idea of concentrated networking. And then the final thing was this sense of community, that we're all in this together. And that has served us very, very well on the site for a couple of reasons. One, people do come in a little bit more optimistic after they read that letter, and they do realize that there is a really active and vibrant community. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is that there's no negativity on the site. Like, everybody has to stand in front of their own name. There's mm-hmm. no aliases. You mm-hmm. can't put your company name. And then the second part about it is that the community polices itself, because there's no negativity. You're allowed. Healthy debate is fine, but being an asshole about it is not.
Right.
We've had, in 4 years of doing this, we've only had to kick 5 people off the site for being abusive. Mm-hmm. That's out of 500,000 members. And those people were warned at least 6 times. So we're very proud of that as well. But that sense of community and that sense of being all in it together, and the sense that I am just like you, is something that we kind of carried over from the Razor days. And I actually have some people that work with me now that work with me at Razor. So that mentality carried over even in the workforce.
I think generally, like, filmmakers, I've been doing this for a long time as well. And I just noticed cynical, like, filmmakers, actors, writers, everyone's so cynical nowadays.
Yeah.
So
and even online, it's worse.
But online, because there's no defense. There's no you can hide online. So it's just so there's so much cynicism in the world, and I think it's also because filmmakers and creatives, as a general statement, are beaten down so much by whatever business that they're trying to get into, whether that be writing, screenwriting, art, whatever. But I think that the community like yours, specifically for our niche, is wonderful to have that kind of positive thing, and that's what I try to do with Indie Film House. I try to create a positive and informative place. From, like, I always say, I'm giving you the info from the streets, because, like, I'm living it. This is what I've gone through. This is not what they're teaching you in film school.
Yeah, it truly comes across. It comes across in the podcast. It comes across in your blogs. All the stuff you write, and that's it. You've been through it. You know what it takes, not only from a professional standpoint, but from a psychological standpoint. And that shows in not only your interviews, but in the writing.
Oh, I really appreciate that, man.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thanks. So, since Stage 32 is all about networking, can you discuss a little bit about the importance of networking, not only online, but in the real world, and tips on how to do it correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. How much time you have? Absolutely. It's very interesting. I just got back from the Austin Film Festival, which is a screenwriting centric festival. The whole conference is compiled of people, screenwriting conferences and screenwriting classes and things of that nature. And I was speaking on social media for screenwriters, but it's the same for all creatives. And it always amazes me, the people that say they don't have enough time or I'm too busy writing. And, it's that whole, if a tree falls in the forest, it doesn't make any sound. If a screenplay's sitting in a drawer, does it ever get read,
Right.
And
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
We get these questions all the time, and the reality is that's vitally important. And I'll use my personal approach to it as an example. First, I will say that, I landed my screenwriting manager. I have a screenplay in development. I produced a movie that went to Sundance. I have another film, a documentary I'm working on, a couple of acting things that I've been invited to be a part of. All of them have come through working Stage 32, not because I run it, but because I went out there and I made contacts and did what I needed to do. So right there and then, I could state that none of this would have happened for me without social media, without working it. So for me, every day, I hone my craft, I write, or I do something on the acting and producing side, and I spend at least an hour or two working social media. I treat it as a job because I think it's vitally important. As far as best practices are concerned, look, I said this, down at the conference, and I've said it a million times, in other areas, and even over at Rain Dance a few weeks ago. The most competitive advantage that you can give yourself on social media immediately that'll put you ahead of 70% of the pack is, one, to realize that it's social media, that you're not there to broadcast, you're there to communicate. Okay. It's the biggest mistake people make is they go on social media and they're broadcasters. The second thing that people do is that they don't ask questions. Okay. They think they have nothing to offer. Okay. They think that, what do I have to say? How do I connect with other people? Well, one of the great equalizers and one of the great ways to invite conversation, of course, is to ask a question and to make it more about the other person than about you. So that's the second thing you could do. A third thing is to share content that you think will be relevant to your community, to the people who are following you. All these things are so easy to do and will give you such a unique advantage over so many people that are out there doing it wrong. And I could tell you, because I used to run the Stage 32 account, which now has about 140,000 followers on Twitter. I can't tell you that, I could tell you that probably 70 to 80% of the posts that were made to the @Stage32 Twitter account per day were posts at me, as opposed to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Look at help me, fund all this stuff. And it never got my attention. And it shouldn't get my attention, because if you met me in a room, you wouldn't walk up to me and do that. So
throw a movie poster on you, like, here, promote this.
Or come walk up to me and yell in my ear and go, hey, support my crowdfunding campaign. It wouldn't happen. You wouldn't do it. Okay.
Right.
So don't do it online. So those are the best practices. The biggest mistake that people make as far as what they can control beyond the actual posting is not using the biographical and or other fields or upload fields that a service provides for you. For example, on Stage 32, you can put your bio, you can upload your reels, you can upload your screenplays, you could put in your credits. There's a million things to let people know exactly who you are, where you've been, where you're looking to go, and so on and so forth. So many people don't do it. And what ends up happening is, if people are looking at you, or if people want to come, if you say to somebody, hey, I'm an actor, I'm really great, and they go to look at your profile and there's no reels or anything or headshots, they're not gonna know how good you really are, and they're not gonna go chasing around the internet to go try to figure it out. So a lot of people make those mistakes, or make that mistake, not using. I see it on LinkedIn as well, which I'm on there as a CEO and as a founder of a tech company. Much more so than I am as a creative. But I see it all the time when people will come to me and say, hey, I want to connect with you, and I go and look at their profiles and there's nothing there. And
Right.
I go, why do I want you as a contact? What's the purpose? So It's a little bit more than you asked for, but the
No,
whole
no.
thing is, yeah, I mean, the whole thing is definitely fill out your bio completely and use all the, all the fields and all the areas that the platform provides. But then as far as best services, you want to be a communicator, you want to ask questions, and you want to share content.
The funny thing is that we met basically through Twitter.
Right.
Yeah, you tweeted out that you listened to a great interview I did with Suzanne Lyons, and you just went, "Hey, great thing," and like, "Oh," and I knew who you were, and I was like, "Oh, hey, Richard," and then we started talking a little bit, and then I'm like, "Hey, I'd love to have you on the show," and you're like, "Yeah, sure, no problem."
And look, if that doesn't encapsulate exactly what I was saying,
Yeah.
it was complimentary to you. It was
Right.
about you,
Mhm.
and which was genuine, completely genuine. I thought you did
Mhm.
an amazing job with Suzanne, and you responded to that. And a lot of people will say to me, "Hey, would you look at my Twitter account?" Like I'll do these like conferences, like I said, and then
Mhm.
people will say, "Well, would you look at my Twitter account and tell me, or look at what I'm doing on Stage 32 and tell me what I'm doing wrong?" And you
Mhm.
look and you go, "Where do I start?" Okay, you're barking at people. There's no biographical information. There's no headshots. There's no. I mean, you're just not painting a picture. You're not. The whole idea of social media is to paint a picture of your personality, of who you are, what interests you, what you're looking to do, and you do that by sharing information, but also being inquisitive about other people, and sharing content and things of that nature. You're painting a full picture of who you are.
And if I could take that to the next level, it's basically you're building a brand. You're marketing yourself.
100%.
And that's what
100%.
and that's what people don't get. People don't get that. Look, you are a brand. Woody Allen is a brand. Martin Scorsese is a brand. Will Smith is a brand. But they're obviously huge brands that have been around for a long time. But that's who you are. You have to build yourself up as a brand. So you've built your brand up with Stage 32 and all the work and other things that you're doing outside of Stage 32. I'm building up my brand through what I do. And people don't get that. Even on a smaller scale, you don't have to have a Stage 32 and Indie Film Hustle to kind of build a huge brand or anything like that. But you could just do the basics of like, this is who I am, this is what I'm about, and just start creating that brand on Twitter, on Facebook, on Stage 32, on any of these platforms.
You couldn't be more right. I mean, you couldn't be more spot on. And the other part that people don't realize is that it's a marathon and not a sprint.
Oh, yes.
It doesn't, you're not going to get 50,000 followers overnight. You're not going to get, on Stage 32, you're not going to get, 100 network requests in a day until you start going out there and branding yourself and showing people who you are. Now, like I said earlier, I used to run the Stage 32 Twitter account. That's since been passed on. We have a social media, I call her the social media czar. And I only created my, but people knew that account was me, and I was the one posting. It was clearly, delineated that, and disseminated that was me.
It's your flavor.
It was my flavor, but it also said, post by RB, post by Richard RB Botto, whatever.
Yeah.
Now, about a year ago, I started my own Twitter account, and that one I made a little bit more. I'm still sharing all my interests, and it's still sort of on brand for who I am. But what I didn't do on the Stage 32 account, which I do now on the RB Walks Into a Bar account, is
great. By the way, great title.
Great
Twitter handle.
Well, and that alone tells you a little bit about me,
Right.
and that alone makes it a little bit fun. And
Sure.
It's.
But that's a brilliant branding thing, and that's something as simple as that. And is what I preach and I yell about from the top of the tower, or from the ghetto, from the crowd, wherever you want to say. But I'm always yelling about this. I'm like, look at that small detail. RB walks into a bar. That says volumes to me about your personality, your sense of humor, the kind of person you are on a very superficial level, but at least it gets me interested. I would much rather go look and follow a guy, RB walks into a bar, as opposed to RB or Richard Botto, like anybody.
Right.
It just makes it more fun, and that's branding. That's branding yourself. And so
Right. And I don't want to be, again, I'm not the stuffy CEO guy. I'm not, and I'm the creative guy. I do that as well, like I said, and I want this to be, a fun account, but I also want to give a little flavor of who I am. My photo on there is not me in a suit with a tie.
Right.
It's a more fun picture, and it's something that somebody took that said that has to be the photo for RB Works at the Bar. So fine. And, but even this stuff I share, I do share obviously a lot of film stuff because it genuinely interests me and because I'm in the business. But I do share, about my Mets, my that killed me the other night.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
But about the like my other interests, like about exercising and places I'm going, and I'm on this trip or I'm on that trip, and to make it more rounded and to make it more three-dimensional and to make it more interesting and to make it more fun, but to also make it more human and relatable, and that's really what it's all about. You want to be relatable on social media. The great sort of equalizer that social media has presented in this day and age is the fact that you can reach anyone anywhere if they're on a platform. If you're on Twitter and you want to tweet to Jon Stewart, you're going to tweet to Jon Stewart. Doesn't mean he's going to respond, or it doesn't mean he might not have a handler there, but you never know. You
never know.
You don't know. And I know a filmmaker who I spoke with at Rain Dance who, tweeted out to a I'm not going to say who it is because I don't want this guy to get bombed, but tweeted out to a very, very popular English actor and said, I really would appreciate if maybe you'd see this film, or if they formed a relationship first. But the guy said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I made this film."
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And he wrote back a couple of days later, goes, "I saw your film. It's amazing." And he started tweeting it out all over the place. And all of a sudden, there was all this interest in the film. I mean, you just don't know, but it's all about your approach. The one thing I do know is if this gentleman would have approached this actor and said, "Look at me," he wouldn't have gotten a response. That would have never happened. So it's all about approach, and it's all about realizing that with accessibility comes great responsibility, so to speak.
Yep, I have a friend of mine who actually tweeted out to an Academy Award-winning screenwriter, and wanted him on his podcast show. And he's like, "Sure, yeah, no problem." And you would have never thought, and he had literally just won the Oscar like a few days earlier.
Wow!
So it was just like it just happened to be, and again, I don't want to say what happened, who it is, and everything, but same. It was just like I'm like, really, that happens? And he's like, "Yeah, it happens. You just never know." It's kind of like that shot in the dark with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but you increase. I think with everything you do that is
proactive.
And that gives you that advantage, the advantages that I spoke about, or the advantage I spoke about earlier. The idea of being selfless. I have a rule on social media that you ask 3 times before you ask something of somebody else. You ask of them what you could do for them 3 times before you ask them to do something for you. And I think it's an important rule. I met with an Academy Award-winning producer the other night, a documentary producer, and he's had a couple of challenges, and I have some contacts. The first thing I said to him was, if there is anything I can do for you, and it put him on his heels because he literally said to me, he goes, I get asked all day. I can't believe, I get asked all day. And this is a friend of mine, and he was still put on his heels. You know what I mean? It matters. It matters that you make the attempt. It matters that you make it about the other person. It matters that you show interest, but it's got to be genuine. You know?
And the thing a lot of people don't understand is that they think that just because you've reached a certain level in the business that they get bombarded daily, by everybody. Give me. They're like leeches constantly. Can people come? And I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't know, but there's people that are just constantly trying to suck from them. Whether can you get me a meeting? Can you get me this? Can you do this for me? Can you do this for me? And I can imagine that's why you're saying your friend was completely taken back by someone like, "What can I do for you?"
Yeah,
and it's so powerful.
It is powerful. Can I tell a quick story?
Sure, go ahead.
Really good one.
Go for it.
So I'm at the Austin Film Festival a couple of years back, not this particular trip. And one of the cool things about being at Austin is a lot of the people that speak there, they bring down a lot of really big names. And what's cool about it is these people don't just come and speak and disappear. They actually hang out at the Driscoll, which is the hotel in downtown Austin. It's this famous old hotel. They hang out in the bar. The bar area is gigantic. And the whole court in the bar, it's kind of, they feel like it's their way of giving back. So anyway, there's this Academy Award-winning director and screenwriter that everyone on this podcast that's listening to this podcast knows very well. Mm-hmm. And he is standing, I happened to be sitting next to him because I was talking to him, and a bunch of people came up to like kind of mob him. And he said, let's go one at a time in line. I'll give you guys like 5 minutes each, come up and talk, right? Yeah, and it's fun, but this happens all the time, and it's fine because it's a festival. They expect this, but I just happened to be kind of on the flank, so I got to hear this and see it firsthand. And so the first guy comes up and he launches into his screenplay and what is this, that, and the other thing, and the whole thing. And you could see, I know the personality of this guy a little bit, so I could see that he was, just waiting to come in for the kill. It's kind of his personality. And he's just waiting and biding his time. And finally the guy stops and he goes, did you need to take a breath? He goes, are you done? And he says, I'm done. And he goes, so 5 minutes, he goes, and you didn't even say hello to me. I don't even know what your name is. And the guy just looked at him. And he goes, okay, I want to speak to the next person. The next person, but the next person in line was not in earshot of this. Okay. They were lined up a little back.
Oh no.
The next person comes up, a woman, very, very kind. And she says to him, hey, I wanted to ask you, movie X is one of my favorite movies. And there's that one scene where this happens. Did you write it like that? Or did you write it differently and then film it a different way? Or was that the way it was intended to be? Or did the actors find that in the scene? Or did it just, and he said to her, he goes, that's a great question. He goes, thank you for asking that. And he answered it very nicely. And then he said to her, what do you do? And she said, well, I'm a writer. He goes, and he reaches into his back pocket and he pulls out a card. And he says, I give out 3 of these a weekend. He goes, you send me whatever script you like me to read, and I'll read it, and I will give you an honest critique. And if that doesn't illustrate the difference, I don't know what does. Okay?
Wow.
But
that's an awesome story.
Yeah. And that is what happens all the time. So this, woman screenwriter who was, very sort of, she had done some really good work too, because I knew her. And, but she had a hard time getting access to anybody, ended up getting a read by this Academy Award-winning director and screenwriter who ended up getting her a meeting with an agent after. There you go. How's that?
And that's the definition right there. Right there. Yeah. And that's maybe 0.5%. And the rest of the people are the ones who are doing that yelling and screaming and barking out. And there's that one bit that get it. And sometimes I get it. They get it.
That's it. And that's why I say, for all the people that are listening to this podcast that say social media is not for me, or I don't get anything out of it. And I'm telling you, go onto the platform, fill out your bio, upload your headshots and anything else that you could do on that particular platform, and then go out, ask questions, share content, and just be a participant and not a broadcaster, and you'll reap the benefits.
And I'll tell you what, I opened up, I've only had Indie Film Hustle now for about 3 months or so. So it's not been, but it's grown dramatically, very, very fast. And before Indie Film Hustle, I wasn't a big social media guy, because I just, same thing. I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm going to post some funny cat videos. Oh, there's a Star Wars trailer, and that's what I would do. Like anytime I would see something funny, I would just kind of post it on my personal site. And that would be it. But then opening up Indie Film Hustle, I'm like, well, I'm going to have to get into this. So then I started learning about it and really working it. And it's fascinating. I'm having a conversation with you today because of it.
I listen, I see the way, again, if you're listening to this podcast, check out the way Alex runs his social media, runs Twitter and everything like that. I mean, it's exactly that, right? But I mean, it is. You communicate, you're putting out great content, you ask questions. I mean, that's why it's growing so fast, and you're building interest because you're putting out very interesting material and putting it out there in a way that's not, pompous and look at me and egotistical. Yeah. And, speaking to you speak to your experience in a community kind of way. Like, I want to give back a little bit, as opposed to, this is my experience, listen to me. There's a big difference there. I
honestly appreciate that, because and that's the first time someone said that to me, because that's just the way I naturally am. I'm like, I always wanted to give back. And it's funny that you say that, because I could easily see how it could look the other way. Yeah. Because there are people out there going, this is the way, watch me, look at me. And, I have 40 years of experience. You have to do it this way, and I'm just like, look, this is what I've done. This is how you do it as well. Like, look, this is what's working for us.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, there's a famous Silicon Valley investor. He's very well known, and, not only up there, but kind of globally, for some of the bets he's made along the way. And sure. He wrote a bunch of books. And, when he first got on Twitter, if he put up, I'm sitting down to eat, it would get like 6,000 retweets. And what ended up happening was, he actually took that approach where I'm right. This is the right way. This is the way it gets done. And at first, because he was who he was,
Sure.
people would line up behind that. And again, he would still get all the retweets and the favorites and all this other stuff and on and on and on. Now you see this guy posting his crickets because a lot of very, very influential people have come behind him, so to speak, and said over his shoulder and said to the mob, You know what I mean? First of all, it's not the way to talk to people. Second of all, this isn't the only way. Third of all, you don't. If you're this rigid in your thinking, how can you be successful long term? And then, of course, he took a couple of hits, and now all of a sudden, even when he posts, excerpts from books he's writing or lines from books,
No one cares.
or inspirational tweets or anything like that, now it's down to 20 and 10 and 8, and you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, people tune out. After a while, there's a lot of noise out there, and people don't want to be barked at. You know what I mean? They want to.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Have the soothing sounds at them as opposed to being barked at, and there's too many people barking. You don't know which dog is making. If you have a pack of dogs, you don't know which dog's making the noise.
Right, exactly. So I wanted to talk a little bit about writing with you.
Sure.
Can you tell me about the first time you were actually paid to be a writer?
Well, I did get paid for journalistic pursuits.
Sure.
As a screenwriter, I still have not. I've had, I'm repped. I have a script that's over at WME right now that's being read by directors and things of that nature. The free option ththing never interested me because I know enough to be dangerous in this business. I've been out for a long time, so I don't do the free option thing. So, I've written 4 scripts, and one of them independently I was producing, and it was a $3.5 million script that we had $2 million into before everybody went completely bonkers and the whole thing fell apart. So,
I've never heard that. I've never heard a story like that before.
I know it's shocking.
It's generally when the money's supposed to drop, it drops. I don't understand why.
It wasn't even so much. The funny thing it wasn't even so much the money. It was that the guy with the money and the guy with the vision decided to play a little game of who's what is bigger, So
also never heard of that story in Hollywood either.
Yeah, I know that's another shocking story too. They should make a movie out of that. So to be honest, no, I have not been paid for a script as of yet. But hoping that email or that phone call comes.
And that also tells people like, look, man, we're all struggling. I'm struggling to be a director. I want to make my movie and go out there and try to make. I haven't made a feature yet. I've made a ton of shorts, and they've been successful and so on and so forth. But now next year I've put the gauntlet down that I have to, and I've been promoting it on my podcast a lot. Like I'm going to do it next year, so I've got to write it now.
Yeah, now you really got to do it.
I got to have it done next year somehow. So, now, do you have any advice on pitching a movie idea to a producer or executive?
Yeah, and let me just to back up on the getting paid thing. I mean, and the scratching and clawing thing. I think that's the big misconception anyway with a lot of people is that people think that they see somebody with a credit or two or and even people and they just think that it's easy or that you get a manager and it becomes easier. Listen, I have a very, very good manager in this business. He's somebody that's been around the business for a very long time, reps some gigantic writers. I still have to be my own best advocate for everything I do. I still have to go out there and network. I still have to go push things. He works. Don't get me wrong. He's working on this one project. He's the one that got a WME, and he's the one that's got it pushed around to a lot of. It's being read by like 20 directors. It's great, but I still have to be my own best advocate, and I still have to go do the work, and I still have to go do the networking, and because it matters. It matters. I like telling people like Spielberg had to go to India to get money for Lincoln. Nobody.
Yeah, I always tell that story too. Like it was freaking Spielberg,
and he had to go. Listen, and the movie Scorsese's making right now, Silence. This is a movie he's wanted to make since 1976. Nobody would make him give him the money for it because it's a smaller film and it's not a very, very commercial film or commercial story. And, so he had to wait 30 years to find the money for that. So we're all scratching and clawing, and it doesn't matter how big you are in this business. It's still a battle, and I think it's a lesson that needs to be learned. So, I just think that at the end of the day, you always have to remember that no matter who you have out there championing your cause, excuse me,
sure.
you're still your own best champion.
And that's one of the reasons I call this indie film hustle is because I truly believe that everybody, no matter how big you are, is hustling at one level or another. James Cameron went to Fox and hustled Avatar. And mind you, it's a large hustle. It was probably like a $500 million movie, and now he's doing God knows how many more of them. But he still had to hustle. Spielberg has to hustle. Scorsese. So if these guys have to hustle and these guys have to work, who the hell are you not to?
Exactly right.
And that's what I always try to tell people. I'm like, you guys, and that's all the one other big thing. And I think this is something you preach as well, is this is not only not a sprint in a marathon, and it's a lot of work. You've gotta love this, man, because I'm gonna make a side note. I know a lot of people don't know this about me, but I used to own an olive oil company.
You just went up 10 more notches if that was possible.
I used to own an olive oil company here in Los Angeles, and I owned it for 3 years with my wife. It was a family business, and if I tell you the stories of who I met, I used to work farmers markets, and if you want to talk about some rough work, that's and I was doing it because I was trying to build up my company and everything. But I sold olive oil to the biggest celebrities and the biggest directors you could imagine, which is so funny. I could tell you stories about it. But my point is that I had a website and all this stuff, and there was only so many articles I could write about olive oil.
Right.
There was at a certain point I could not. I liked it. It was wonderful. It's delicious. It was obviously I had some sort of, I really liked doing it, but at a certain point you just have to go, I just don't, I can't wake up in the morning and write more articles about olive oil, where with the complete opposite, indie film hustle, I have too much content. I have content lined up probably for the next 3 to 5 months.
God bless you. That's great.
I just have so much of it, and I don't want to release it daily or weekly because it just, daily would, I'm only one person. So, but I have so much content already, and I'm like, and my wife's like, how are you doing? I'm like, oh, I've got podcasts for at least another 3 months ahead already. And then I have articles that I'm writing, and I get pissed because I can't release more content, but it's because I love doing it. I love doing what I'm doing. And that's something that people don't get. Like, if you're going to get into this business for being rich or famous, but I was talking to John Reese the other day, and John gave a great analogy of Sundance and the lottery mentality, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Mm-hmm. And you shoot, and he's like, look, there's 50,000 feature films made a year in the United States. Out of those 50,000, maybe 20, I think it's 20 or 30,000 get submitted to Sundance. Wow. Out of that, 15 or 13 are picked for competition. Mm-hmm. Out of those 13, 1 or 2 might get picked up. And out of that 1 or 2 that might get picked up, will probably never see a dime past the initial money that they get paid.
Yeah. And John, yes, I love John. I know John very well. John's going to be featured in my crowdsourcing book. I think I get where he's coming from completely. Mm-hmm. I do think, and I get where you're coming from completely, where you got to love what you're doing. And I think that kind of goes back to the famous Michael Jordan quote when they asked him, 10, 12 years in, why he was still in the gym, 2-3 hours a day. And he said, because if I'm not, somebody else is. And I love that line.
It's a great line.
But I do think that there's, it's part of a bigger conversation of all these films and everything like that, and where even what the paradigm is now and how everything is shifting right now, and why it's becoming a DIY world, and again, what you can control, like how you can control what you can control. So I think that, I think the paradigm is, or I think that maybe even the takeaway a little bit is that, if 50 to 60% of these films are being submitted to Sundance, there's probably, let's call it at 50%, say it's 25,000 films.
Sure.
There's probably 24,000 people who are being completely irrational, and that probably should, take it to another path. I mean, that might not be a Sundance film. Maybe it's a direct to a direct to platform film, whatever, or maybe it's
not the right genre, right? Exactly.
Yeah, who knows? But I mean, again, that's a matter of educating yourself as a filmmaker, and that comes back to, or as a producer, and that comes back to being the guy that outworks the next guy, and learning the right places to submit to, and giving yourself the best odds to succeed. And I think that in this day and age, one of the things that we're losing And it's another reason why you need to be on social media, is that no matter what you're doing as a creative, you're a business person now too, because you have to know the business.
Yes.
You have to know the business. You can't just create and go into a shell,
I
and
did. Yeah.
expect somebody to carry the torch for you. Like, and all of a sudden call you up one day and say, hey, guess what? We're getting, 10 Paramount's buying it for 10 million. We're going to go. Yeah. It's not, it doesn't happen like that.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
So you have to look at what's happening in the business, look at the trends, look at the shifting paradigms, look at all the who's buying what, where, and what gives you the best opportunity. And you need to be a part of that. And if you're not, if you're not, significantly equipped to handle that, you need to surround yourself with people who are. They need to be part of it, almost like your cast and crew.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, like I said, I get John, I get where he's coming from as far as that's concerned, but I do think that there are a lot of things that you control, and I think a lot of people make a ton of mistakes or are very, very short-sighted in the way that they approach things after they're done filming.
Yeah, and I did a whole podcast episode just about the business. Like, guys, you guys have to understand. You have to understand the business of it. If you don't, then this is a hobby. You have to come up with a long-term plan to make yourself a sustainable artist and make a living as a sustainable artist. And that's what people are like, oh, I just want to make a movie. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. I just want to write a script. I just want to act. I'm like, well, that's great, but people always use the Ben Affleck and Matt Damon thing. They wrote themselves into a career, essentially. They did, and there's a lot of actors who now, with the way things are, they can team up with the right filmmakers and there's so much opportunity now, man.
There is so much opportunity. Right.
You and I come from, I'm assuming you're probably in the same generation I am, though you look much younger, sir. But you and I are both in the same generation, in the time before the internet, the time before crowdfunding or crowdsourcing, before, technology was cheaper. I mean, I made my first demo reel, my commercial demo reel was shot on 35 and it cost me $50,000. Back in the 90s, you know what I mean? So like, that's all you had. There was no other option.
No,
go ahead.
I was going to say, again, I just wanted to clarify that I was legally able to drink the night before Facebook launched.
Nice.
No,
thank you, sir. I appreciate the honesty.
No, I get where you're coming from. I mean, I completely get where you're coming from. It's very, again, I think the biggest mistake that people are making right now is not staying up on what is happening and how rich the opportunity is. And I think you're right about the whole idea of a hobby versus looking at it as a profession. And, I got asked this question again at Austin. They said, okay, you're telling me that I need to do an hour of social media along with the hour I dedicate to my writing every day, and so I treat my writing as a job because I get up every morning and I write for an hour. Now you're telling me I have to find an hour for social media, and I said, you do. If you're serious about it, you understand. And I said, do you get Starbucks in the morning? I go, you go for coffee in the morning? Yeah, I do. How long do you usually stand in line on average? 15 minutes. I said, do social media. Yeah. You know what I mean? Do social media. I said, you come home. I said, do you watch TV at night? Like, yeah, I try to unwind. I said, what do you normally watch? I watch sports. Why are you watching the game? Well, do social media. I mean, you can do it. I mean, it's not like that's the beauty of what the internet has created. And that is expanding now into online distribution platforms all this stuff that is available to us that people are taking for granted, crowdfunding and things of that nature. People are not only taking for granted, but they're not educating themselves enough to give themselves a fair chance to be successful at it. Crowdfunding is a perfect example of that. It's the if you build it, they will come mentality. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work. It's about creating an audience, building support, building a brand, as you said earlier. Mm-hmm. It's all about all those things, and it's being freaking informed. And a lot of people just aren't. A lot of people aren't.
And a lot of hard work.
It's a lot of hard work, but
it's worth it.
But if you care, so you said it perfectly.
If you love it,
you're going to do it, and you're going to find a way to do it. No, I mean, absolutely. I get up every morning. I tell this story very often, but my day starts every morning. I get up earlier and earlier these days because this freaking site has become a monster. But I get up earlier and earlier, but what I do is my first hour of my day is it's still, I call it my time. But it's actually work because what I do is I read all the trades, okay? Mm-hmm. I stay up to date on everything that's going on, I go to all the usual filmmaking and screenwriting sites that I normally go to see if there's any information I need to learn. And I usually, if there's nothing much going on that doesn't take me through the hour, I usually have a list of 2, 3, or 4 topics that in priority order for me that I want to research, that I want to learn about. And that's the first hour of my day, So, call it dedication or call it lunacy or call it not having a life. I don't think it's not having a life.
It's hunger.
Actually something I enjoy. It's not only hunger, but I enjoy it. It's something that I desire to do. So to me, it doesn't feel like work. And I think that if you get to a point where you're really, really serious about it and you're getting returns on it, and you're starting to see the benefits of it, it won't seem like work. So, but it's a marathon, man. You got to get yourself there. It's a state of mind. It's that, again, it's the Jordan mentality. If I'm not in the gym, somebody else is.
And it's like, give me someone who's hungry and who's going to work his ass off as opposed to someone who's talented.
100%.
I mean, there's just no question about it because talent only takes you so far. Like Jordan says, like Jordan's talented, but it wasn't just talent that got him to where he was. He worked his ass off.
Yeah. And I mean, it could work against you too. I mean, your social skills and your ability to understand the business. I have a producer friend that is working with a screenwriter and a filmmaker who has been around for 25 years. He's done some decent stuff, but he's never quite flown all the way to the sun. He's flown close to the sun, but not all the way there. And the producer friend was saying, like, I never could quite put my finger on why he never got there. And ultimately what ended up happening was because he was going to write and direct this film, he was dealing with producers who were bringing the money that really understood the business. And he really didn't. He really didn't understand what they were getting at. And here were people that were basically saying to him, take our money and go make a film. And he was pushing back on things that, I mean, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He was pushing back because he didn't quite understand why they wanted to take the road that they wanted to take. Yeah. And I got to tell you, I know the facts of the case. He was completely wrong, and it wasn't anything to be precious about. And it was something that was actually very smart on the producer's end. They understood the business, and the whole deal fell apart. And all of a sudden, my producer friend said to me, now I know why he's never flown all the way to the sun. Now I understand why he never made it all the way. And it's just because he was uninformed, unaware of what was happening in the business, unaware of the trends, not understanding of where they wanted to go because he didn't know enough about it. And he had ample time to go learn about it. First of all, he had ample time to just listen to people, but he didn't want to even do that. But he also could have went off and researched it on his own or tried to figure it out or go ask questions of people around him that, might be knowledgeable on these subjects. And he didn't. And ultimately his deal fell apart. And now he's got nothing.
And if I could tell you 1,000 of those stories.
Yeah. And I guess I wanted to put the emphasis on the fact, because you said talented as opposed. He's a very talented guy. Right. You know what I mean? He has all the tools, but it's
not about talent.
It's not there.
It's not enough.
It takes you so far, as you said.
It's not enough. I know people who are much less talented, and as filmmakers and in other disciplines as well, and are successful because they just outworked everybody around them.
That's it.
And that's the key to success as a general statement. Well, I mean, this is like a Tony Robbins episode. Jesus.
Look at that. Yeah, what did this turn into? People should pay for this.
I know, right?
We should get everybody up now and do like one of those motivational dance things where everybody's like clapping their hands.
So have you been to one of Tony's things?
No, but it's so funny. I haven't, but I live across the street from a woman who used to be an attorney for him that now actually runs some of his shows. So I have actually gotten to see during volleyball games on the beach the whole entire, dancing, clap your hands, and everybody's fantastic.
It's a fun show. I've been there.
People. Yeah.
So you have a book coming out on crowdsourcing, right?
If I finish the damn thing, yes, it'll come out eventually.
Oh, eventually. So can you tell me the difference between crowdsourcing and crowdfunding?
Sure. Very, very simply, crowdfunding is, the raising of money through a collection of people for a project, and it could be anything from film or a tech project or a product or anything. Crowdsourcing, in its simplest terms, is all about identifying, engaging, and moving a crowd. So what crowdsourcing is what we talked about a little bit earlier, is about building an audience for a project or for your own brand, for the brand of a project or for your personal brand. And what I mean by that is, I'll give an example of I'll actually use one of the examples in the book. Documentary called Mile and a Half. It was about hikers hiking the John Muir Trail, 5 cinematographers and 1 sound editor, all health enthusiasts, and obviously all in the business. What they were hoping to do, by the way, if you're not familiar with the John Muir Trail, it's a 206-mile trail in the Pacific Northwest, and people could hike parts of it, but you have to get a permit to hike the whole thing. So they went out and secured these permits, and what they were hoping to do was to capture the entire trail and the various ecosystems along the trail in the natural beauty through bringing the state-of-the-art filming equipment and sound recording equipment. So it doesn't exactly sound like the most riveting documentary or something that would be.
Oddly enough, I'm a nerd. I would watch that.
Okay, yeah, but, if you're not, but it kind of falls into why this is so interesting is because they recognize the fact it wouldn't be for everybody. So what they did was they had an $85,000 raise on Kickstarter. That's a high number for any film, never mind a documentary that kind of has a niche audience. But what they did was they went out and they recognized, they said, okay, who do we want to cater to? And they said, well, let's start with the gearheads, the filmmakers, the people who are into this kind of equipment, the cinematographers.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And then let's start talking about the health enthusiasts, the people who are into hiking, the people who are into camping, things of this nature. And what they did was, before they ever launched the crowdfunding campaign, and before they ever decided to even talk about pre-production, what they did was they went out and they made Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts and all this, anywhere that they could, Google Plus and everything like that. The whole entire team took various days and various platforms to post information about what they were doing. And then what they did was they targeted audiences within the sectors I spoke about, or within the categories I spoke about. Like they went after the hikers and the health enthusiasts, and they went after the campers, and then they went after the gearheads, and they went to those bloggers and to those boards and to those Twitter accounts and started following them and saying, hey, this is what we're looking to do. Here's who we are. Tell us a little bit about you. If you were going to go on this hike, what would you like to see? They went to the nature enthusiasts as well. What would you like to do? If you're a hiker, what should we bring on the trail as far as food is concerned? They did contests, like, in a hiking cup for one day, what kind of food can you put in there? They got people engaged. They got people into it. They got people into what they were doing. They got organizations to, get behind them. Within a couple of months, they had REI donating equipment for the hike. This was before they ever put up the crowdfunding page. Okay, so they were crowdsourcing their audience. They were identifying their audience. That was this part of it. And then they were engaging the audience. They were engaging them through contests and questions and giving them ownership of what was going on. Should we bring this particular? There's 2 cameras that are state of the art right now that do sort of the same thing. Which do you like? Which brand do you like better? You like Sony? Do you like Canon? What do you like? And everybody got into it. Everybody was all about it. They engaged them constantly. They filmed videos of the team getting ready to go on the hike and what they were going to do, and all this stuff. They went on a part of the trail and took some pictures as proof of concept and filmed some stuff to show what they were going to do. All of this stuff paid such dividends that by the time that they launched the crowdfunding campaign, within 7 days, they were about 70% funded. Okay.
Of course.
That is crowdsourcing an audience. And, people say, what is the difference between crowdfunding and crowdsourcing? I already gave sort of the definition, but what I tell people is that there should be an element of crowdsourcing in every crowdfunding campaign. If you know who your audience is and you know who you're trying to target, well, you should begin targeting that audience, 3 to 6 months before you ever before you ever hit launch on that crowdfunding campaign. So that's the basic concept of it, but it's applies to everything you do online. It applies to everything you're doing for your brand. It applies to everything. If you want to be an expert, Alex, you're an expert in independent filmmaking.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know about that, but
well, you're positioning yourself as somebody who has had all this experience, and you're doing that by putting all this information out there. Here is your your podcast, here is your blog, and then you're going out and you're talking to people on social media. So you are crowdsourcing a specific audience that is going to be interested in this material. And you said earlier, you're like, I just can't believe how quick it's grown. It's grown so fast. it's grown so fast because you're crowdsourcing that audience so directly, and these people are buying so into what you're doing that they're spreading the word for you. And that's ultimately what you want them to do. And what usually happens with a first-time filmmaker, let's say crowdfunding, people are going to buy into the concept the first time. People are going to buy into the idea that, wow, that's really interesting. Like, it's a baseball movie. I love baseball. I'm going to spread the word to other people I know who like baseball, and so on and so forth. But then what ends up happening is if you deliver on your promises and you deliver that film and you stay in touch with those people, you say, hey, now we have distribution here, and hey, now we're going to do this. Like the Mile and a Half people, I mean, they ended up, the very first film festival they got into, it was the first film at that festival that they had to put a second screening up because there's so many people showed up. When they got onto iTunes, they went back to the crowd and said, hey, can you please let people know that we're on iTunes now? And they ended up being the #2 documentary behind Hero Dreams of Sushi, which I think has been #1 since the dawn of time.
It's a really good documentary.
It's a great documentary. But they were #2. I mean, that's fantastic.
That's amazing.
1 million downloads, all these downloads and everything going on because they stayed in touch. So filmmakers, for narratives, it's the same way. They're going to follow you. Like I used the baseball movie example. If you deliver and you're talking to them all the way through and you're still giving them original content, behind the scenes types of things and keeping them engaged, if all of a sudden tomorrow you sit there and go, my next film is going to be about, I don't know, pick a topic that could be furthest away from baseball. I don't even know. But, it's
a vegan chef.
Yeah, it's a musical about a vegan chef. Okay.
I would watch that.
we might divide right here.
Okay, no, I'm joking.
I'm thinking. But what ends up happening now is that it's no longer about the brand of the previous movie. It's about the brand of you. And you've crowdsourced an audience for you as a filmmaker. So to illustrate that example, I have a friend who is a director who has done 5 films on crowdsourcing. Has crowdfunded 5 films. The first one was a short that was $5,000. The last one was a narrative that was $150,000.
Oh.
He has had no problem making that goal, each of those goals along the way. And he has taken audiences from the first movie all the way to that movie. And the films could not be more different. And they want to follow him into fire now. So it started with the brand of the first short, and now it's the brand of him because he crowdsourced that audience. And when you crowdsource the audience and you give them what they ask for, what you promise them, you're going to carry them. You're going to have a fan for a long time.
Right. It's kind of like the concept of, Woody Allen, who's been the only filmmaker, I think, in history who's made a movie a year for the last 40 years or something like that.
Yeah.
People go to see Woody Allen movies.
Well, and they buy into the brand. You see,
that's his brand.
I guess the thing is, if we're going to get into sort of the Woody Allen thing, because I like him, I've always liked Woody Allen, always been a big fan. All the negative press this guy has gotten, some people might not have been able to survive that on a creative level. But the thing is that people aren't buying into the brand of Woody Allen as a person. They're buying into Woody Allen as the brand of Woody Allen as a filmmaker.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that people lose sight of is that, that's what he has cultivated all these years, that when you go to a Woody Allen, you could expect a certain something. Now, I know that there's 50 people in the audience that just said shit, but
sure.
And I will admit he's been hit and miss. But I'm saying
no. There's some stuff that he hits like wow, and then there's other stuff like But that's an artist. Like no one's like what's it? Ted Williams hit 300. Was his batting average?
344.
There you go. Like, and he was considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest.
Absolutely.
Out of 1,000.
It's just, but I guess the message is just the brand, man. I mean, you're cultivating an audience that is going to support you. And if you do it correctly, it's really one of the most powerful things you could have as a creative.
Right. You could create and actually sustain a career. And a living. So how are we on time? Do you have a little bit more time? I have a couple
sure.
More. All right, cool.
I'm enjoying the hell out of this.
All right, cool, man. I appreciate it. So if a writer or a filmmaker has no representation, how do they get access to some Hollywood executives or producers? What kind of advice would you give?
Well, I could tell you that the way I got to my manager was through an agent I met on Stage 32 that lived in Montreal. I mean, of all things,
Jesus. Yeah, that's a heck of a long way to go around.
But it proves a couple of things. I always hear like, I'm on social media. I got a contact from India. Like, why the heck would I want to contact with somebody from India? And I'm like, well, I know a composer who lives in Florida, just scored a movie for a person in India. So there's that. I got my,
Right.
manager through a connection in Montreal. It was a person who had read my script and contacted me and through social media. And it ended up leading to a director getting attached. That ended up leading to his representation in Hollywood, which led to me getting to my manager, and I wouldn't have got there any other way. That was very, very organic. I hear these stories all the time. So I'm not just telling Stage 32 stories. Another example of a story I heard just recently down at the Austin Film Festival again was a screenwriter who connected with the manager on Twitter and started interacting with her, talking about the industry, just, asking some questions about the industry, asking some questions about her, the manager. And, one thing led to another. And the manager actually went over to Stage 32 to check out her account and found her log lines and went back to her on Twitter and said, which of these should I read? And, much to the surprise of the screenwriter, because she didn't even ask. And the screenwriter told her which one to read or sent her the script of the log line that she felt would be the best. The manager read it, loved it, went back to her. So let me read one more. She read one more. And within a week, they were on Skype and she was signing her.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And, it's a great story and another example of how social media, can work to your benefit to find a producer or a manager or even an agent, if you're an actor, let's say. And then, with the Stage 32 Happy Writers, as far as finding a producer, a manager, an agent, and again, not to turn this into an ad or anything, but, Joey Tuccio, who runs the Stage 32 Happy Writers, started the Happy Writers in 2011 independently. He was a executive of Bold Films, a development executive. He read a ton of scripts, loved the job, loved working with writers. And he loved the writers so much that even things that Bold wasn't picking up, he was going to meet with writers and helping them and talking to them. And he just decided that he wanted to go do this for a living. And he used his industry connections to bring in executives who were looking for material, either managers who were looking for writers or for development executives that were looking for material, producers, and so on and so forth. And he would match up the producers and what kind of content they were looking for with the writer that had that content. And I was blown away by this. I got to see it firsthand in 2013, started doing some work with Joey, and ended up acquiring the company because this is seriously the most ethical and most caring guy you've ever met. I mean, he is just like the Pied Piper of screenwriters.
He's like Mother Teresa of screenwriters.
He is like the Mother Teresa of screenwriters. And everybody loves him. You had to see him down in Austin. I'm not kidding you. Every writer that knew of him was rushing to him to talk to him and to get his help. And it's been amazing. It's been an amazing ride. So those are a few different ways. One, of course, is just doing it on your own and doing it organically and through social media, and then another example of doing it through the Happy Writer service.
So like with that story, the Twitter story with the manager and the writer, I find that a lot in this business is about just being able, if you can find someone who you can enjoy being around and just kind of like that you can like sit in a room with and not, that carries a lot of weight.
It certainly does. I mean, look, everything on social media should be conversational anyway. And it should be what ends up happening. I mean, look, I've made so many friends. Never mind. Let's take it off of the business thing. So many friends in this that are, in the industry. So many people that are in the industry that are now my friends. And what ends up happening is those friends become champions. And like I said earlier, not very eloquently when I was trying to say champions. You need champions in this business. This is a word of mouth business. You talk about screenwriting. There isn't a manager I've met who, when I've had a conversation with them, hasn't mentioned the three piles. And the three piles basically is that they have three piles of screenplays on their desk. One pile is the people they represent. The second pile are referral screenplays, people who have said, you need to read this writer's work, or I really like you to take a look at this. And the third are what they call the mutts. And, those are the ones that either come in through queries or other, other ways. And the mutts don't often get read, or they get pushed to the bottom of the pile all the time. They bang through their writers, the people that they rep, and then they really are anxious to move on to the ones that have been recommended from somebody else. So it matters so much to have champions. And this is just another reason why social media is so important. And also another reason why you don't necessarily need to be in LA to be successful, because you can make friends anywhere in the world through social media, and contacts anywhere in the world through social media. So I actually know people who have been, who have made contacts in LA who have been referred to, like, let's say, producers in India. I mean, it's crazy how it works, but it's a big world, but it's not that big of a world. It's kind of a small world in a lot of ways, and it seems to get smaller by the day with social media and even with online streaming and everything else that we talked about earlier.
How international is your community in Stage 32?
We have members in every country in the world, 500,000 members worldwide. It's pretty amazing.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we have a Stage 32 meetup section where anybody in the community can organize a Stage 32 meetup in their area. We encourage people to do it so that they can take their networking to the streets and you meet people face to face, because that, of course, is invaluable as well. And I believe to date, I think we've had Stage 32 meetups in something like 110 countries. It's pretty incredible.
And a lot of things too, also the generation coming up behind us. I think a friend of mine was telling me, is like the communication skill is all on the computer. They have actually no person-to-person skills. And that's something that people really need to work on.
Absolutely good. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Yeah, because it was like people are just, I could tweet, and like they could be really, wonderful tweeters, but when you get them in front of you, they just cower down or they shy. I'm like, you've got to build that skill set up of just being able to talk to somebody, make someone laugh, and engage with someone on a personal level in person, not just online, because at the end of the day, making movies is an in-person kind of process.
Absolutely. It matters. Look, it matters if you're a crew person and you're interviewing with a director, they want to know that you have some sort of personality and that you have something to offer. If you're a screenwriter, reps want to know that you're good in the room. Reps want to know, producers want to know that you're going to work nice with a director. You can be able to communicate. It goes all the way up the chain. Again, I'll use another awesome example. I asked people who had used a pitching service before whether they prefer pitching a written pitch or pitching through a written pitch or pitching through a Skype or spoken pitch, and 90% of the room said written or raised their hands and to indicate written. And I said, why? And I asked a few people, and some of them said, well, because I'm a writer. I don't need to tell you. And I'm like, man, you couldn't be more wrong. You're going to have to be in a room one day, and you're going to have to communicate. You have to get notes one day, and you're going to have to communicate why or why not you think that's a good idea, or fight for your position if you need to. And even more so, if you're successful, if you have a rep, you're going to have to get into a room and pitch. And so you do need to have those skills, and it is very important to step out from behind the computer every once in a while. And the other beautiful thing about the technology today is that you have things like Skype and GoToMeetings. So you have people now auditioning across the country or halfway across the world over Skype. I mean, it does matter, and there are ways to do it. If there isn't a community type thing in your area where you can go to a conference or to an acting class or things of that nature, you could still hop on a GoToMeeting, meet people online, and take it online through video conferencing as well. So there's no excuse not to do it.
Absolutely. Now, do you have any tips on getting an agent or a manager, or do you need both? Do you need just one? That's a big question on a lot of people. I'm for one also. Would like to know.
Well, I think it depends on your profession. What your craft is, what your discipline is. For screenwriters, that's always the big one. Is I want an agent. You don't need an agent. You need a manager first. And actors obviously going after agents and so on and so forth. It just depends on what your discipline is. The way to go about it is to be very active and visible, and to be constantly honing your craft and to make the connection that matter. It all comes back to these things over and over and over again. I go back to my whole thing with my manager. If I didn't accept that network request from this agent in Montreal or accept his message and have a conversation with him, I wouldn't be in the position I'm in right now. But I got to be in that position by being visible and being active and this person noticing me. So I just think that it's, it's what you put out. It's playing the long game. It's the talent. Listen, I hate to be this base. I hate to be this base, but really at the end of the day, talent does rise to the top. Content rises to the top, but the content and the talent can't rise to the top if it's not exposed.
Right.
If it's not, if it's not being presented. So if you're not out there and you're not making those connections and you're not getting yourself in the room or getting yourself read or, getting to the right casting director or finding out about the right audition, things of that nature, or doing even a film as a proof of concept and getting it out there and not being precious about it, because people creators are way too precious and, aren't willing to release their work. All of that, if you don't do that, the talent can't rise to the top. If you don't expose what you have, it's not going to happen for you.
Right. And that's another thing I always preach about is marketing. People just don't understand that marketing is not just that sleazy thing they saw in Mad Men, but it's about putting yourself out there and putting your projects out there and putting yourself out there. And I've been doing that since I started the game. And
you can see the difference it's made in your career. I mean, if I could contrast you against the screenwriter filmmaker I mentioned earlier, the example I gave earlier with my producer friend, this is a guy that, he kind of lives in a bubble, and he, he just wants to create the work. And, you could say that that's aloof, or that's, a character problem, or whatever you want to say. But at the end of the day, it's really a flaw. It's a business flaw. I mean, it's not only a character flaw, but it's a business flaw.
Right.
And, you're not giving yourself a fair chance to be out there, pushing yourself in a manner that is going to attract, that's going to make people want to make people work with you. You want to make them be in the business of you. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. You want people to be in the business of you and of what you do. And a lot of people do lose sight of that, or they don't see it at all, don't look at it at all.
Now, a personal question: what do you love more, acting, writing, or producing?
Oh man, such a great question. It really is, and it fluctuates all the time.
Sure.
It's interesting because it fits in with everything else we've been talking about. I like them. I like them all, but I like producing from the standpoint that I love the business end of this business, and I like the process and the machinations of putting together a project. So
we'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
There's something about producing that's really, really cool, putting the pieces together, putting the puzzle pieces. It's also quite maddening at times, but putting the puzzle pieces together.
Tell me about it.
But from a creative standpoint, I love writing. I always have loved writing. It was my first love. It wasn't always screenwriting. It was journalism and other writing and short stories and things of that nature. But I love that process as well, because it's also like a puzzle to me. It's almost like a
big puzzle.
You go, yeah. Yeah, and you go in, it's also like a little bit like jazz in its own way. Like, some of it is structured, some of it's free form, and some of it, but somehow at the end, if you do it right, it really sounds amazing and it really kicks ass, and all the, everything flows, plot, subtext, characters, arcs, everything just kind of connects, and, there's nothing better than that. But, I started as an actor in New York, and I love that process as well. And I think that it was very, very influential for me, informed how I write.
Right.
I always encourage people who are writers to take an acting class or an improv class. I think it'll open their minds tremendously. So, I'm grateful for all of them. Acting is the one I've done the least over the last few years. I've been doing much more on the writing and producing side. But I would, step back into it in a heartbeat.
Nice. Now, where do you see Stage 32 in the next 5 years?
Well,
funny you should ask, Alex.
If it doesn't kill me.
Tell me about it, brother. Tell me about it.
I hope I get to see it in 5 years. No, I mean, we are in the process of forming some amazing strategic partnerships. I used to joke that I wanted this site to be Home Depot for film creatives, and now it's not so much of a joke anymore. Only, instead of opening store after store after store and kind of doing offshoots of the original store, what I'm doing is, connecting with very strategic partners that complement what we're doing at Stage 32, that I think is going to be very, very exciting for the community. We're going to be announcing some of those over the next few months.
Great.
But as far as our strategy is concerned, we have been recognized as the leaders in education for people in the film business. And, We want to continue to be that and continue to expand our educational offerings and to assure that no matter where you are in the world, that you're getting exactly the information you need, even if it's geo-targeted. We recently did one in the UK for UK tax incentives because it's a very, very different process than it is in the US. We did one on visas and things of that nature for people looking to travel or move. We're definitely going to continue to do those types of classes and then expand into more tutorial types of offerings and things of that nature. We just want to give everybody all the tools that they need to succeed. We said at the top of this whole thing that it really is about support and collaboration. And one of the things that inspired me to bring education into this community that goes beyond that one story I told about finding, the snake oil salesman online and everything like that, that were selling, that weren't qualified to teach, and they were selling these ridiculously priced educational offerings, was the fact that, I was an actor in New York, and it was easy for me to find an acting class, and it was very, very easy for me to find an acting group and hang out with acting friends. When I moved to LA, it was easy for me to find other screenwriters and other producers and things of that nature. But when I started being asked, and I was quite pleased with this and quite honored, asked to speak around the country and around the world on screenwriting and on social media and on crowdsourcing and crowdfunding and things of that nature, what I found was when I was sitting in front of, people in, like Nebraska, or if I was in, even in France, where there's a big film scene, talking to people, the lack of information, the lack of education that was available to them was staggering. And that really, really inspired me to make the connections that I needed to make to bring in the top educators that we now have on the site to bring education to everybody in the world. So that's something that we're going to continue to do, and that we have a laser sharp focus on. But I also have some, vision as to where the platform can go in other directions, but I just can't
talk about it. I can't talk about them right now. Obviously. No, that's the one thing sometimes, being in LA, you forget that we live in this LA bubble. Sometimes that we just like, oh yeah, I'll just go down and pick up a red. Like you throw a rock and hit and buy, and get 5 reds, to work on a project, and with like seasoned DPs with and they'll work like, yeah, I'll work on the weekend for you. We're in that kind of knowledge and that kind of access to things you take for granted because you're here in LA, and then you forget that there's the rest of the world that might not have access to that, especially education. And that was when I did my first little movie, Broken, 10 years ago. I put a tutorial of 3-hour tutorial on how we made it because I could not find anything that showed how to make an independent film with a DVX 100A small mini DV camera and Final Cut. Like there was no information about that. And because of that, I was able to sell a ton of them, and I built a community up, and people really enjoyed it. And I was like, wow, so you're doing much at a much larger level. Obviously, Stage 32 is doing that now.
Yeah, but that's why where you are, because you see, it all starts with giving back, and it all starts with wanting to fill a void, and you recognize the void in that particular instance, and you said, I want to be able to give this to other people and share my experiences. And that's another big part of this, I think, is that it's not only the education, and I mean, of course, within the education, you're going to get people who are going to share their experiences, but I think that part of the education is so invaluable. It's not just like, here's a curriculum and these are the things, it's real life examples, people who have been in the trenches, like I said earlier, people who have climbed to the top of the mountain and lived to tell about it. And and are willing, and not only willing, but they're really anxious to tell about it and to help. And I think that that's part of what makes the good communities out there, and we're not the only one, but the really good communities out there sparkle, is that there are people within that are really selfless, and you're a shining example of that.
Oh, thanks. And sometimes you don't even have to be at the top of the mountain. You could just be ahead of where the other person is. And that's what I learned that a long time ago. Is like, you can always be a teacher because you don't have to be the expert, the beyond all experts. I'm never going to be Steven Spielberg. And I'm sure if he ever taught a master class, my God, but I'm ahead of a lot of people, and I'm below a lot of people as far as experience and knowledge and things like that. So all you have to do is just, share what you have, and people will, and if people could pick even one thing up of it, you've helped somebody.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting now is, again, as this putting it expands from the standpoint that the barrier of entry has never been lower to enter, and that means that when the barrier is lower, of course more people are clearing the barrier, and that means that there are more people in the pool, and that means that there's more opportunity, and that means that there's more noise, and there's all on and on and on. What's interesting is that we have, like we said earlier, new paradigms and stuff like that, and there are people that if the paradigm is even only a few years old, there are people that have really become experts in those areas, and we want to bring in those people so that while this is still kind of in its infancy, or while that area is still in its infancy, people could really get a competitive advantage that's going to push them halfway up the mountain ahead of all these people. And so that's kind of it's kind of what we're all about too, is kind of identifying those trends and making sure that the people in the community are offered educational classes and webinars that keep them ahead of the trends.
Right, exactly. So this is my last two questions. These are the fun ones, but they're obviously the most difficult. So prepare yourself.
I'm digging it.
What are your top 3 favorite films of all time, and what are your top 3 most underrated films of all time?
Ooh, the second one's going to be tough. My top 3 of all time. This is really tough, but I'm going to go with a few obvious ones. I'm going to go. I am one of these people that believes that Citizen Kane is a masterpiece and broke the mold, and on and on and on.
Okay.
I'm a huge Godfather 2 fan. I would add Godfather 2 a slight edge. Ooh. And slight,
very slight,
very slight, and. I have to pick a Scorsese movie, and it's such a split between these two movies, but I would say either Raging Bull or Goodfellas.
Yeah, I knew Goodfellas was coming.
Yeah, I would be one of those two. I know the Italian New York thing, but I think they're masterpieces. But I mean, there's so many other ones. Right there. I mean. You could go all the way down the line. Casablanca.
Yeah,
you just go on and on. I mean,
it's one of those films. Like, what are the 3 movies you could think of right now that are your favorites?
Exactly. I could name 5 Coen Brother movies that I would take with me anywhere.
I mean Fincher. I mean, I love Fight Club. I love Seven. I even love The Matrix. I thought that broke the mold in many ways as well. So,
and there's so many of those types of movies too. The ones that really broke the mold. So yeah, I mean, there's a million of them. There's a million of them.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. All right, and then Pulp Fiction and so on. So what are the 3 most underrated films you think?
Oh, man, that's really, really tough.
Yeah.
Because it really is tough. Like
3 movies that you saw that why has no one else figured this out?
Man, I'll tell you, recently. It's really tough. There's one movie that's coming into my head recently that was an indie film that it did well. I just don't think a lot of people saw it. A lot of people have heard of it, but when I talk to people in the industry have seen it, but a lot of people outside haven't. And that's Short Term 12. I thought was an excellent movie.
Oh yeah.
An excellent indie that I feel like people, kind of slipped by people. Man, alive, what a tough question. Underrated.
Or just movies that you think that people haven't seen because, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp is it's an insane movie of its time. Things like that, movies like that that Martin Scorsese has been talking about that one or I Am Cuba. Have you ever seen I Am Cuba?
Yes, yeah.
Just that's
very good, very extremely underrated.
Right.
This is a really tough one because everything I'm thinking of are things that I feel like are popular films that I feel like didn't get. I think of, again, I go to the Coens and I think of the Hudsucker Proxy. And
I love the Hudsucker Proxy.
I love it too, but a lot of people, it's one of the most films,
Burn After Reading. I love Burn After.
It's a very good movie. Even Miller's Crossing, that I feel is one of my favorites, by the way, but I feel like, when you talk to even people that like the Coen Brothers, that one got by me. Man, that is a really tough question.
I will leave you. I will let you off the hook. It's okay.
Yeah, I think you have to.
No worries. So can you tell people where they can find you?
Sure. Well, obviously you can find me on Stage 32. If you do sign up for the site, the first thing you will see is that welcome message that we talked about earlier from me. I do answer answer. If you respond to me, I do answer every single post you see on the site that has my face next to it. It's me. Nobody else answers for me or anything like that. My staff told me the other day that I've made something like 800,000 posts or something on the site. It's
because
like
this is why you're not going to make it in 5 years.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I am on Twitter at RB Walks Into a Bar. Exactly what it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
And my social medias are recently insisted about a week ago that I get on Instagram, and that's also RB Walks Into a Bar.
You're not on Instagram yet?
No, man.
Oh, man.
I only have so much free time, dude.
They all connect. I'll show you. I did a whole thing with Instagram and Twitter, man. It's like Instagram's amazing, and if you have a good flow or a good feed, people like go crazy for it. And
so now tell me, because the social media czar says no more than 3 posts a day. So let me hear your.
I'm actually coming out with a course.
There you go.
I'm actually coming out with a course soon. I'm working on it right now. How to get 10,000 Twitter and Instagram followers within 10 weeks, and how they're actual real Twitter, like real followers, like engaged followers. And I have a technique that I used with some software and things like that I was able to do. And with Instagram, I use probably about 6 times a day. I've been slower recently because I've just been so busy, but minimum 2 or 3 a day. But around 6 a day when you're starting, and there's certain techniques that you use within the post to generate more traffic to your post and start getting followers faster and faster and faster. And then what you post, how you post it, and the techniques of that specifically for your niche, and my niche is film. So there's certain things you can do to, get the crowd that you're looking for. Again, it's all about crowdsourcing, like you were saying. So it's that similar process. And then whatever I do on Instagram goes straight to Twitter and goes straight to Facebook. So it just feeds it. It's like an automatic. So like anything, I just feed it, and I feed it to Tumblr too. I'm a Tumblr idiot. I do the best I can. It's like, so
you're everywhere, dude.
I try to do as much as I can, but like Tumblr is one of those things. I was like, I have a bunch of followers on Tumblr, but I'm not seeing traffic from it, so I don't focus my energy on it. So if they ain't feeding me back, I'm not feeding. I keep feeding them, but I don't like focus my energy on it. That same thing with Pinterest. Like I'm on Pinterest. I've got over I think 1,000 followers on Pinterest, and I post everything on Pinterest. But again, that's a whole other. There's only so much time in day. I need a czar. like you did.
That's what I'm saying. But I'm doing it all myself. She's just making me go on there. I have to go on my own post, but. I might have to take this course. She may not. She may have to take this course.
It's a fun course. It's a fun. I did it when I started Indie Film Hustle. So I kind of sat down at an Indie Film Hustle right before I launched. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try to do this, and I started from zero. So you can go back and check my Instagram when I started it. You won't know at what point I hit that 5,000. It's 5,000 per each. 5,000 Twitter, 5,000 5,000 Instagram. So you get a total of 10,000. And I started doing it, and I was like, oh, wow. It's like, and I started doing it. I was like, oh, this is working. Holy cow, it's starting to work. So then I started like getting busy, and I started tailing off. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I gotta hit my 10,000 mark. So then I boosted it up for like the last week and a half and doing my techniques, and it worked. I was like, wow, it's like, I literally could just turn it on and off with like a spout. For getting more followers and following people and getting engagement too, which is a big thing. So, and engagements, believe it or not, I'm sure you have 140,000 Twitter followers, so I'm not telling you anything, but the engagements, like out of 140,000, now we're getting into a social media conversation. Yeah. Out of 100, what do I have, 140,000 followers? Something like that? On the
Twitter 321, yeah. On mine, about I think 12,000, maybe.
All right, so
that's the one I just started.
All right, so you got 12,000. What kind of interaction? Interaction do you have with that? Like when you post something, how much do you get? Like how many retweets do you really get out of 12,000 people?
It depends. I mean, like, it depends. It's like 15. I mean, it could be 15. It could be 5. It could be 3. It could be,
right. That's my point. So like you think like that's exactly my point. Like. You've got 12,000. I've got like about almost 7,000 now on Twitter, and I got almost 9,000 on Instagram. And on my Instagram, like I've gotten no more than 300 likes. on out of 8,000, and that's like blown out. Like it was a picture of the Joker dressed in Renaissance, in a Renaissance garb. Beautiful, just a beautiful picture that some guy did. But my point is that, like, even at 12,000 people, you're not getting 1,000 reposts. It doesn't work that way. You get a small. It's like if you have an email list, you've got a 10,000 person email list. You'll get, if you're lucky, 20 to 30% open rates, and then you get maybe another 2 to 3% click through rates. If you're really good, 5%. So, and that's what people don't get. Like, you've got to have these large numbers in social media for them to even make sense. For you even if it even dents your traffic, but then also making things viral. And that's art in itself, creating topics, the things of people really want. Like, for me, the biggest podcast episode I've ever done, and it has now currently almost 14,000 downloads, which is a lot for me. That's 14,000 downloads for an independent film podcast. It's a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that was on post-production workflow. And you'd never
a very riveting subject.
But the way I presented it was post-production workflow, understand it or die. And and that's how I presented it. And it's all about marketing and packaging and branding. But I present, as opposed to just like tutorial and post-production workflow. It's still like, it's how you present the package. And people were like, what? And it blew up, like completely blew up. I was like fascinated. And I'm a post guy, so I'm like, I could talk about post all day. Shoot.
Well, and there you go, though. You injected your personality as well.
Right.
There's branding into that as well, your sense of humor and everything else. I mean, there's something to it. I mean, we're not, for those of you who are listening, we're talking like we're in our backyard.
Right, exactly.
Popping a few beers.
Everyone left already.
If you're still listening and you're eavesdropping in, this is what we're talking about. I mean, it really is all about engagement. It really is all about showing that personality and, putting forth content that people care about, and also realizing, to your point of, 3 retweets, 5 retweets, 300 likes, that it is a marathon. Like, you are spending this time branding. If it was that easy, we'd all make one post a day and call it a day, but it doesn't work like that.
We'd all be Kim Kardashian at that point, and we could charge $10,000 a tweet.
And we would all have a perfume line then.
I'm actually coming out with the Indie Film Hustle perfume line.
Oh, there you go.
It smells like a sweaty grip.
It smells like a sweaty grip. That's fantastic. Get gripped.
Wow. You see, I'm going to steal that one, sir.
There you go.
But yeah, it's all about that. It's all about, that marathon. And that's something I think age teaches you a little bit. And experience teaches that a little bit. It's hard. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. To think like that when you're in your early 20s,
Well, but I also think, it's
tougher.
There's a divide with different platforms, of course, and with social media. And I think that there's two things at play. I think that, every platform has a different audience. So people in their early 20s might gravitate to Instagram or gravitate to Snapchat, things of that nature. It to me, it's not so much the age and the platform. To me, sometimes it's the frustration, or it's not even so much the frustration. Sometimes I got to tell you, because we see this a lot on Stage 32. It's you're being given the information on how to use it, but you don't want to read that information. You don't want to take the time to read that information. You just want to come in and start blasting people, or try to figure it out on your own and maybe lose ground that you might have gained by reading how it's done. So a lot of people, because they get frustrated, just give up the ghost.
Right.
And that was something that we heard in Austin in the social media panel. Was I said, how many have given up a platform? And a bunch of hands went up, and I said, why? And I was like, either, it's too confusing, or I wasn't getting anything out of it, or I was on Twitter and I got, everything I put out there, I got no retweets. And I'm like, well, what were you putting out there? And again, it was more of the, tell me examples of your tweets. It was more look at me kind of stuff. So, there's so much information. I tell this to people all the time. Google is your friend. There is so much information online on how to use individual platforms and how to get the best out of your content and how to write blogs and how long a blog should be and how to create original content, on and on and on and on. it's up to you to consume that. And it's up to you to digest that. And it's up to you to parse it. And it's up to you to put it into use and to put it into action. But a lot of people don't do that. So I think that sometimes that's the reason why people just quit, or they don't really, or they don't use the platform correctly.
Right. And like I was saying earlier, the whole marathon thing, not only for social media, but like as a career. And I think that's where, and I was like the first 10 years of my career, every little thing I did was like, this is what's going to give me that lottery ticket.
Right.
This is what's going to win.
Thing. No, that I agree with.
Yeah, that's like, this is going to get me here. This is going to do this. And like, if I do this, then Harvey Weinstein is going to give me that check. And I'm going to go make that movie just like Robert Rodriguez or just like Tarantino or Kevin Smith or any of the other guys. And only after the business has beaten you down a bit, and life in general beats you down. And that's just life. It's life. As you go through life, you get harder and you realize things. And age is something, experience, there is something to say about experience. That's why anytime I hear, and please forgive me, any 21-year-old DPs out there, it just upsets me because cinematography is such a craft that takes years to learn. But you know, sometimes some of these DPs who are 21-year-old DPs like, oh, I've been making movies since I was 12. I'm like, shut up. Oh yeah, I've been editing. I have a YouTube. I have 5 million followers on YouTube. I'm like, son of a bitch. On that note, sir, I will leave you be. Thank you so much for being on the show, man. Any parting words for the Indie Film Hustle tribe?
Well, you know what? I just to everything you just said. I mean, I think the thing is that, you know, if you embrace a philosophy of, you know, this is the whole philosophy of the, you know, this is a marathon and not a sprint, but more so that, you know, control what you can control, do the best you can, like we said earlier. If you embrace that, it won't beat you down quite as much, because, you know, for every overnight success story that you hear, and they're, you know, rarer and rarer. Actually, well, in this day and age, you know, when people are getting signed.
But they are rare. But they're still rare. Like, you know, we're still talking about Robert Rodriguez, you know, and that was 22 years ago.
Right. And it's just, if you realize that it does take a long time, and it does take, you know, perseverance and persistence. But the thing that you can do, and you do this, and it's not just in your career, it's in every walk of life and every minute of your life, is control what you can control. Yeah. You know, and if you do that, I think that, you know, you'll win more days than you lose. You'll go to bed happier more nights than you go to bed frustrated or upset. And you'll wake up more mornings ready to be shot out of a cannon. So, you know, that's really what it's all about, you know, is staying in the game and, you know, doing what you can. And as you said earlier, doing the best work you can and controlling what you can control.
If I may quote Rocky Balboa, it's not about how hard you get hit. It's about how hard you get hit and keep moving forward.
That's right.
Yo. RB, thanks again, man. I appreciate it.
Yo, Alex.
Wow. I had such a ball with RB, and he was just such a wealth of information that literally, like I told you at the beginning of the show, there's just so much different information in this episode that I really couldn't pinpoint just one thing. So it really is, in a lot of ways, a blueprint on how to make it in the business. A lot of wonderful bits of information there. So I hope you guys got something out of it, because I was taking notes throughout the entire interview myself. So, guys, don't forget to head over to filmmakingpodcast.com if you guys want to leave us a honest review of the show. It really helps us out a lot. And if you want links to all the things we talked about, head over to the show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/029. Guys, thanks again for listening. Keep that hustle going. Keep that dream alive. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.